Hey folks.
Hi.
Hi everybody.
Hello.
We are live again here for Adam and TEGAN'S Labor of Love.
Yeah.
And you may have noticed that we are outside today.
In the blinding
searing
hot sun.
You can see that
Hey Rachel.
TEGAN actually doesn't exist. This part of her is all I need to just shadow.
Right.
Put a little
I do have hair.
Yeah. So you guys might be wondering, well, why are we outside today? Are you wondering why are we outside today?
I'm definitely wondering why I'm outside
Yeah,
today.
before it seemed like a good idea. Well, part of the reason that we are outside today is because we are focusing on something that's really, really, I think hits all of us in one way or another, which is allergies.
Yeah.
We're talking about allergies today, and when you think of allergies, we often think about being outside. We think about the hay fever, and we think about runny nose, ragweed, all the stuff that happens seasonally.
Sneezing.
Exactly. And
rashes.
And the thing is, allergies affect us in many different ways, and more than just plant allergies. We are experiencing allergies all the time, which is a great segue to introduce one of our newest staff physicians, Dr. Kerri Stasiak.
Hi, nice to meet you all.
So Kerri and
Thank you for having me.
Of course, we're so pleased.
Yeah.
So Kerri and I went to med school together at the University of Bridgeport College of Naturopathic Medicine. And she and I became good friends over the course of the years that we were there.
Yes.
We spent many an afternoon entertaining each other, right?
Yeah.
Giggling about ridiculous things.
Complaining about all the ridiculousness of the teachers. And
Right. Yep.
Hey Dante, hey Michaela, good to see you guys.
She and I have had a couple of conversations over the past few months, and she felt like she was really ready to launch into a new stage and a new part of her career, and so we've invited her to join our team. We're extremely excited about the asset that she is to us and what she brings for all of you.
Yeah.
And so, really her wheelhouse is the immune system and allergies, but she has a very unique and special take on it. So we thought it was a good opportunity for you guys to get a really good sense of her history and how she thinks as a physician and how she treats her patients.
Yep. So, well, I think, why don't we just start off, Kerri, with telling us, why you started getting into allergies. And I know allergies is just one of the things that you focus on. You also have a really unique form of diagnosis that maybe you can talk about as well.
Which we will get into.
Very cool.
Yeah. So tell us, how did you get into allergies?
So kind of going back, my history, I've been always very active, into health, and eating healthy, living a healthy lifestyle. So in high school, and I cheered and I did running, and I started experiencing some sciatica pain. So growing up in a family full of chiropractors, we've always kind of worked about eating healthy, living healthy, really aware of our bodies. So I, got a lot of chiropractic care my whole entire life.
That must have been nice to have, be able to be
it was
adjusted
really
at
nice.
home.
And be like, I'm feeling a little tight. I would always get treated, and it would temporarily help my sciatica pain. But I was only 18 when I started getting sciatica pain. And it was going both legs, it was becoming kind of debilitating to like my exercise routines, and really me being able to be an athlete. Not that I was really a competitive athlete, but still in my own right, still want to be active. Yeah.
TEGAN used to have sciatica, and it was horrible to watch. It was the worst thing, and I've had it a couple of times, so I know the pain.
Yeah.
And one of the worst things about sciatica is you often don't know what to do about it.
Right.
It's like,
and you can't get away from it.
Yeah. Do I put my legs up? Do I put my legs down? All
trying to
this
drink
stuff.
water to hydrate, minerals if they're cramping. You just try everything, which is what I did.
Right.
And it never, like I said, it never really seemed to make a huge difference. So it wasn't until I really graduated school and I started learning about other forms of diagnosis is when I got introduced to Iridology.
Iridology?
Iridology.
Tell us
like
what
the
that
eye.
is.
So iridology is actually being able to look at the eye, looking at the iris, and being able to see genetic weaknesses in our body. So what they say is your iris is made up of the ectodermal kind of tissue. So it's like that genetic imprint that we kind of form when we're in utero, in our mother. And
so your iris itself is
iris
kind
itself
of like
is kind of like
print.
Yeah, it's kind of like very similar to like a reflexology. Looking at the bottom of the feet, you can see all the organ systems. So all of the organ systems kind of have a chart within the iris. So this was actually developed in Germany, and there's a huge practice in Germany, and mostly medical doctors can only practice it in Germany.
Really?
That's cool.
Yeah.
We actually use some iridology markers when we develop people's personalized nutrition plans. Which is cool.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
So when I actually started getting into this and learning more about it, I got a report read of myself, and it said you have a genetic weakness in your eye, and I gave them no history of myself.
So wait a minute, you had a genetic weakness in your eye, or they could see in your eye that you
eye.
have a genetic weakness? Got it. Okay,
They could
got
see
it.
in my
Just wanted
eye.
to make sure I understood.
They could see in my eye that I had a genetic weakness for joints, basically,
Wow.
especially my low back.
Wow.
And muscle kind of tightness, so propensity. They also said they saw, so looking at the sclera of the eye is also kind of part of iridology. It's usually coincides.
Where's the sclera?
Sclera is the white part of
Okay.
the eye that we
Got it.
are, it's different than the dark part,
Right.
not the colored part of the eye, which is the iris. So the sclera is kind of looking at the epigenetics. It's basically looking at the environmental effects on your body, okay? So it's, how much inflammation is going on in the body, and then you can see from those genetic weaknesses that you see in the iris how sometimes, as we know, when we have a lot of inflammation, they go to certain areas in certain people.
Right.
The
right.
people are more sensitive to nasal allergies that we're thinking of. Sometimes people are more susceptible. Every time I'm stressed out, my back goes out.
Right.
Yep.
Type thing.
Yep.
So it's kind of that same idea.
Yep.
When there's inflammation in the body, we goes towards those genetic weaknesses that we can identify.
Which makes sense. And I'm glad to see you here. I'm glad you're finding it a fascinating topic. It is. So when you kind of had that diagnosis that you had the weakness, and you're describing that was in the darker part, in the iris. How did the sclera kind of tell you what was going on for you?
Basically, I saw a lot in that same kind of dermatome in the sclera. Basically, that section of the sclera had a lot of red blood vessels. So if we take a look, next time you go look in the mirror at your home or wherever, look at actually the white part of your eye and see where you can see how many blood vessels do you actually have. If you look at a child, they're not going to have nearly as many as someone who's an older adult.
Wow.
And things like that.
So is it just the blood vessels, or are there other things? Because
there are other
sometimes
things.
I'll see other things.
You can get little buildups of they're called like fatty materials. So you can get a little bit, it looks like raised kind of bumps. That's generally can show like a liver kind of fat malabsorption kind of issue. And there also can be pigmentation in the sclera of the eye. And depending on the color of the pigmentation, if it's more yellow, it can mean more kidney. If it's darker brown, black, it can mean more liver, and other colors based on other things.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Mia has one. Our daughter Mia has one in her eye, and she's been saying to me lately, "What the heck is this, Mom?" I was like, "Well, it's a discoloration in your sclera." But in terms
so with iridology and learning this new information, I was able to really look at wow, there's a lot of inflammation going on in my body. What is going on? So from there, I looked at what could possibly be inflaming me, which is where I turned to allergies. So I actually started looking at food sensitivities, environmental sensitivities, kind of
just started
toxins
that
could be going through the list. And I found that I had sensitivities to dairy and eggs specifically, which are very common in our daily, everyday life. Right?
So you think that was actually connected to
huge portion
to the sciatica?
Because once I started cleaning up my diet and reducing my reactivity and increasing my immune health, my sciatica pain started just lessening and lessening, become less and less frequent. And kind of just been able to really propel, my health in a lot of different ways. And so what, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Well, I was just wondering, so did you see any difference in your eyes from doing that?
I did. As time goes on, I definitely have seen that the blood vessels have lessened. It takes like, so looking at the sclera, it's not like you cut out foods and a week later your blood vessels are less. It's kind of like a hemoglobin A1C marker, which is like more of a
For
3 month,
diabetes,
which is looking at like more of a 3 month period of glucose versus taking your blood glucose and looking at that time and period. So your sclerology is kind of looking at a longer term of how your health is changing versus day to day.
You know what? One of the things I really love about that is that I think we have such a tendency, because we have things that are quick, fast acting and 24 hours and so on, we have this tendency to approach our health from the speed of it being really immediate. And sometimes we forget that we're really moving and growing at the speed of a plant.
Right.
You know, that's nature's pace, you know, and so I love the idea that you can actually kind of just monitor your own health by looking in the mirror and just seeing like the little slow, gradual changes.
Yeah.
As opposed to what often we think of in terms of health, which is I pop a pill and then I wait for something to suddenly change. Like it's very binary, you know, either
and you don't
or off.
always have to like invest in getting all these expensive labs and making, you can actually see over time your body changing and getting better and feeling better.
Yeah.
And just things working overall better.
So this is a great opportunity to say, if we have any people out there who want to test this, who want at the end of this go and look in the mirror, what should they look for if they want to see it, to test now and then maybe test again later?
Well, with the iris, you really have to get like a really, you know, kind of in-depth camera to really be able to see with the crypts, which are basically little like microscopic holes in the iris. And so those kind of mean different things. And so but one thing you can definitely see is your sclera. And you can notice changes within that. The iris, because it is a genetic thing, you can see your weaknesses and you can prevent things from happening, but it's not going to change. Just like, you know, if you have brown hair, no matter how clean I make myself, it's never going to turn blonde.
Right.
Never going to look like Tegan.
Unless you visit CVS and you get Sclera. Yeah.
So, you know, that's just my genetic makeup.
So in other words, what you're saying is if people out there want to test and see what's going on in their sclera and look to see what things they say, post here, let us know, tell us if things change.
See what blood vessels and how big, because if you have a very big blood vessel that's really thick versus some little tiny ones, that is also a difference. And so the size and also the shape of the blood vessel. Very squiggly blood vessels mean something very different than straight blood vessels.
I see that often. Yeah. So if they want something that's more in depth, they need to come see you.
Yeah,
right?
We can definitely give them some more insight and really looking at what's going on in the body using a lot of different therapies, naturopathic, but also using this iridology and really looking at the allergic component. So one analogy I really like to give so people kind of really understand is kind of like when you're driving and all of a sudden your check engine light goes on. So all of a sudden you're driving, it comes on, you're like, oh, I'm in the middle of going somewhere, I'm in the middle of doing something. It's fine, the car doesn't seem to be, you know, making any weird noises, it's driving okay, I'm just gonna keep going.
Yeah.
And then life gets hectic, day-to-day things, and you don't really, you know, go to the, you know, mechanic and figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
You just kind of let it simmer maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think we're all guilty.
Yeah.
So what that's kind of showing is like maybe some subtle things that are happening in the body. Maybe you're experiencing some joint pain, back pain. Maybe you're experiencing fatigue. Maybe you're experiencing abdominal bloating and excess of gas a little when you eat certain foods, and you're like, oh, you know, I'll try to stay away from those foods, or you just completely forget and you still eat those foods and you just kind of take Gas X, or you take something to kind of help primitively but not really get to the underlying cause. So then all of a sudden, now you left the car kind of going with that check engine light on, and now you go start the car and the car won't start.
Right.
You know, now this problem has become such an issue in our day-to-day lives that, you know, it's really now needing to start to cause a problem.
Right.
And so we need to really figure out what's going on.
Right.
So that's where you kind of like, you bring it to the mechanic, you bring it to the specialist, you know, they kind of put in the codes, figure out what's going on, and they can really help you identify, okay, well, this is going on with the car, this is going on with your body, and this is how we can really eliminate it by doing simple, easy things of just eliminating things that are causing inflammation in your body. And it's a nice, simple, easy way instead of having to go spend all this money on IV therapy and all these other things, which are great and help so much in our bodies. It's some key things that we can do that can really make beneficial as well.
Yeah. Like when I'm listening to you, I think a lot of times what happens to my patients when they finally come to do genomic analysis is that they feel this kind of confirmation of what they knew about themselves, but they maybe needed somebody to say, this is the truth about you, or to just kind of confirm that intuition that they had about themselves. And as I'm listening to you talk about iridology and this kind of sort of simple yet really in-depth and intellectual way of assessing a person's underlying health, I can see how that could also be like a really confirmatory way, like a really positive way to start your health journey. I can see it having that effect on people.
And not only are the symptoms just abdominal, they could be mental. It can be problems of inactivity, kind of, or hyperactive. We can see that sometimes in children, where they're all of a sudden now, they're all of a sudden now experiencing problems with inactivity in the classroom. Kind of hyper, not able to focus. And kind of these more irritable, maybe, problematic sometimes. And we're like, what's going on? This hasn't been their, I know my child, this isn't their nature. There's something that's changing. How can I best help my child?
So what are some of the typical triggers for like an ADHD that we might not be thinking about in terms of allergies?
Gluten is a huge one that we all kind of know. Eggs can also be another one for a lot of different people. And it can be something very tiny that you didn't even think of. It could be, I have patients who come in that have sensitivities to all types of peppers.
Really?
Totally. Peppers are intense. For people.
So,
and like food colorings and additives and all that stuff.
Right, red dye.
Sure.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, there's one time that I wish I knew about iridology, which was when Tegan and I first started dating back in our 20s. She and I had this kind of way of treating ourselves to chocolate sundaes.
I never did that before I met him.
Right.
It was like a part of his like wooing.
It was my
me.
courting. It was my courting.
He would show up with like ice cream and like hot brownies.
And I loved to make these giant brownies, and of course I loved Ben & Jerry, so it was like brownies with more brownie in it and like chocolate chip
chunky monkey.
And what would happen is she would really feel horrible at the end of it. We weren't making a connection between what we were eating, because I was also giving her pasta before.
Right. I also didn't eat much before I met him. So he gave me celiac.
So what happened is that one night we were actually out at a party, and we had actually had a lot of wheat and a lot of these types of things. And Tegan, sitting up, started to do this movement that I just could not identify. I had no idea what was going on for her. She was just like shaking. She wasn't very conscious, and I had no idea what I was seeing. And she finally came around from it, and she did that like a couple of other times in the following weeks. But it wasn't until she was laying down that I realized, oh my God, that's a seizure. Like I had no idea that that's what I was looking at, and it was. We later found out she has celiac disease.
Which is really scary.
It's really scary,
go through this, something like that.
And the thing is, I think right now we're going through this time where people are kind of making fun of the gluten, not eating gluten, but it is really, for some people, very serious. For some people, they're just jumping on it as a trend.
Sure.
And trying to lose weight. But for Tegan, and for others, I think it's something that's really debilitating. And so to kind of just have someone who can say, oh yeah, this thing that you're experiencing here, which looks like it's unrelated. We were thinking, that it's a brain dysfunction, that there's all types of things.
I had like a tumor, or and we went to I don't know 3 or 4 different neurologists over the course of the time that I was in college. All of which basically told us we were crazy.
Right.
We even had me admitted one time so they could see what it looked like in the hospital.
Right.
I mean, it was a really scary period in our lives, for sure. And I finally went to a naturopath up in Vermont, and she said, there's a whole subset of people with celiac who don't have digestive symptoms at all. It's purely neurological inflammation. It's purely inflammation in the brain, which we now know that all sorts of neurological conditions are almost exclusively inflammatory.
And the brain-gut association.
Of course. And so much of inflammation is triggers, right? So the immune system doesn't decide to turn on just because it wants to turn on. There's a reason. It's trying to protect us from something. So, I mean, it was interesting. It was definitely one of the stepping stones of me ending up as a naturopath.
I would say it was a major one, right?
Because that was one of the major ones.
Which is really awesome. And then what was also really great, which I think you're kind of hitting on, which is the genetic component, because it didn't just affect her.
Right.
It meant that she could then look at her family.
Right, because and my family has some really interesting genetics, and both my dad and my older brother had really, really struggled with digestive issues and all sorts of, you know, anxiousness and things. And over the course, I worked on my dad. He was pretty easy, and his life changed dramatically.
Yeah.
It took my brother some years.
Yeah, and taking our son even longer.
Yep, we're still fighting with him.
To acknowledge it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it did definitely make a real difference, and it's amazing to see, just as you said, mentally, physically, it was groundbreaking.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's just and it's crazy because, like we said before, like allergies can show up in so many different ways that you might be reacting to, that you're like, really, I don't know if this could be allergy related.
Yeah.
And you know, it could be something that's in your, you know, daily habit that you're used to eating, that you know, because you eat it such small amounts all the time, you know, it's not causing this huge anaphylactic reaction.
Right.
It's just this small build-up.
Right.
That starts happening over time.
It compounds.
It compounds, exactly.
So that brings me to a question, which I've always wondered, which is, I remember being a kid and not having all of these conversations about allergies, right? I mean, it was a really big deal when there was one girl in middle school who died from eating chili. And she had a bowl of chili, and it turned out that the chili and the restaurant had peanuts in it, and she had a peanut allergy, and no one told her. And at that time, no one was thinking about it.
Yeah.
And it was all across all the newspapers. It was huge news. I mean, but it was not something that anyone was talking about a peanut allergy being fatal. Now, when you go to school, when you go to like an elementary school, there's like the peanut section, or you're not allowed to bring anything that has
Not
any
free
peanut.
school zone.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so pervasive. So my question is, are we as human beings becoming more sensitive to certain foods, or are we just becoming more aware of the sensitivities? Have those sensitivities always been there, or are we now kind of somehow creating a world where we're just not able to resist a lot of this stuff?
I think it's a combination of both. So, you know, now that our food supply, we're starting to change. Now foods are becoming now more GMO. They're being sprayed with pesticides and herbicides. And now, since the Industrial Revolution, we have millions of chemicals that we never really had and we were never really exposed to. Nowadays, you know, chemicals, fluoride in our water, chlorine, heavy metals from piping that's being, you know, to our houses for water, and all these other things that we've never really had been an issue. Now our bodies are slowly being exposed to.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a drop in the bucket. It's kind of keeps adding a little bit. And also, since the integrity of our food has changed, our digestive system isn't really capable of breaking down some of these things that we have, that we're eating and ingesting.
Right.
So, you know, combination of we're being exposed to so many more things, and so many more things that are then kind of causing our immune system to kind of react to itself.
Right.
Causing this whole thing of autoimmunity and all these other, you know, kind of conditions that have came up now in the more recent years. I mean, and how that was never really an issue. I mean, even neurological conditions we're talking about with autism and all these other things. There's a lot of huge food components related to a lot of that. So I think it's a combination of that, as well as our genetics over time having changed. You know, and as we adapt to humans, we're trying to adapt more to these chemicals, but I think we're also getting like further away from nature. We're not really giving ourselves the gut health, creating that microbiome, the prebiotics, the probiotics in our gut health to be able to like really defend our bodies and clean our bodies of all these things that we're introducing.
Yeah.
Sure.
That makes
Definitely.
sense. I always tell Tegan I'm often deficient in vitamin brown and vitamin round, which is I need things like chocolate. I need to have beer. Those are vitamin browns. The round, I need to have pizza. There need to be cookies in there. Those are necessities. But I don't have it. I definitely see it in my body.
Yeah. It is constitutional deficiency. It's brown and round.
All right. So it sounds like if people are wondering, whether or not they might have a sensitivity or an allergy, or maybe they're not even connecting any of these dots, but they want to kind of explore it, what should they do? How can we help them with this?
What I would really recommend is trying to maybe slightly do a little bit of elimination. If you know you're eating certain foods and you're like, oh, maybe a few hours, I'm getting this like lull halfway through the day. I'm noticing I'm at work and I'm just like exhausted at 2 p.m. And, I'm feeling this lull, really looking back and trying to connect the dots on what really could be going on, and even foods that you might be something as simple as, the black pepper that you're adding.
That's a big one.
To foods,
Yeah.
thinking that that's not even really a food per se.
Right.
That could be...
It's mostly mold.
Yeah. So that could be something that you're reacting to,
Yeah.
that you never really thought of.
Yeah.
So doing an elimination diet...
Is that something you can help them with?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and there's other ways of testing, so you don't have to go through the whole, let's eliminate all of these foods, and now we have all these special testing that we can do to really kind of streamline the process, and really look at what's going on individually for you and how we can best address this. Because I have actually a bunch of patients who came from Italy and never had a problem with dairy, gluten, anything like that,
Really?
and now all of a sudden have come to the United States and are having all these digestive complaints. And when we do these analysis and we say gluten is a sensitivity for you, they're like, I've eaten gluten my entire life.
Right. So
I
it's
grew
not
up with
just
a
gluten.
staple.
It's
So
that.
what changes? Because sometimes even when they go back to Italy and they're like, it's my family, they're gonna cook that way.
Yeah.
I have to eat gluten when I'm back in Italy.
Yeah.
I can't tell them I'm gluten free. They're gonna think I'm crazy.
Right.
So they go back and then they say, you know what, Dr. Stasiak, I didn't have any problems when I was there.
When they
I
go
felt
back,
great.
they don't have the problem. So it's just
Yeah.
when they're here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's showing is like what is happening to our food supply.
Wow. Wow.
Since we're producing at such a mass amount, how is that changing what we're, our dynamics as in this in this country of like how our digestive health and how we're able to break foods down and how it's reacting with our bodies.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And I think we're only, I think this is really the tip of the iceberg. I think
Yeah.
as time goes on and our food supply starts becoming, wilder and wilder out there, that we're really going to notice a lot more problems.
Right.
I
Wow.
will say that there's hope, though, because I do have a lot of patients who I do genomic analysis with, that once we see their genetic predispositions for things and work on them over time, we retest them for sensitivities and they don't have them anymore.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So I would say that, we do have ways of kind of like speeding up that adaptive part of our systems, right, to help.
Stimulate those healing processes in
Exactly.
the gut and really regulating that immune system so that you're not reacting, kind of
Right.
desensitizing you from these sensitivities that you might be developing.
So diagnose, bolster for the things that you're weak in, and eliminate some of the things that are causing problems. Is that
Yeah,
what I'm
and it
hearing?
doesn't, just because we eliminate something temporarily doesn't mean it's like
It's
taking
gone
it
for
said.
good?
It's gone for
I
good.
still get my vitamin brown.
Yeah.
In little bits. We have
All
to
right.
temper the brownies.
All right, so I want to just thank you for coming
Oh,
and
thank
joining.
you so much for having us.
So excited
That's
that we have Kerri on staff, along with Jen Ayala, who was here a couple of times ago, who will also be a wonderful part of this process. If you're at all interested in kind of looking at your nutrition and thinking maybe it might not just be food, it might be something that's going on in your environment, it might be something that's going on with your skin condition, your skin lotions or shampoos, it might be your spouse, which you need to do an elimination diet of
Allergy
your
to your
spouse.
family.
A
Exactly.
purge, a little purge.
But at Wheelhouse, we can help you. We can help you figure out what it is and how to create a lifestyle that supports your healthy living. So if you want to get in touch with Kerri, you can reach her at K Stasiak. And you want to tell the spelling?
Sure. S is in Sam, T is in Tom, A-S-I-A-K.
Okay, so that's K Stasiak at wheelhouse.health. Again, K Stasiak at wheelhouse.health. You can also always just email the front desk, which is frontdesk at wheelhouse.health. And you can reach any one of us through that.
Yep.
So, guys, if you have thoughts, I'm sorry if we haven't been responding to comments. We have the sun right in our eyes and
we're melting.
and little tiny comments, but we are watching it and we are so enjoying the stuff that you guys are posting afterwards. So share with your friends, tell your friends, and remember to just keep on trying to heal for real. We will see you again next week with Adam and Tegan's Labor of Love.
Thank you for watching.
Bye, guys.
Bye.